Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and happy Water Professionals Week. I don't know if you have the reaction button, or maybe you can just put it in the chat, but let's all just do like a big collective celebration for everyone who's a water pro in the audience today. Thank you for your service and really appreciate all that you do. My name is Megan Roberts. I am the Executive Director of the Association of Women in Water, Energy, and Environment. We affectionately call ourselves AWE, which is much more convenient. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We're dedicated to supporting the professional development of women who work in the water, energy, and environment fields. We do that by hosting educational events, professional development workshops. We have an annual mentorship program. We have a book club and a variety of tours and other activities that we do throughout the year, pretty much throughout the state of California. When we were contacted by CWEA about partnering with them and the other supporting organizations, including ACWA, Baywork, the California and Nevada chapter of the American Water Works Association, and CASA, we just jumped at the opportunity. How could we say no? So we're excited to bring together this really incredible group of women leaders to talk about their professional journeys in the water industry. If this is your first Path to Power event, then you're in for a real treat. My favorite thing about these events is that they're intentionally informal. Our speakers haven't scripted their responses. In fact, we would like you as the audience to have questions for them, and then we really won't know where this conversation will go. So that's what makes it really fun, and these events are always very inspiring. Before I pass the mic over to our moderator, I just want to cover a couple of housekeeping items. I'm not sure that you can unmute yourselves, but if you can figure that out, please don't. We're going to ask all the audience to stay on mute. The event is being recorded. And as I mentioned, just use that Q&A box to drop any questions. And if you want to go into the chat and maybe introduce yourself, if you have your LinkedIn profile handy, you can use this as an opportunity to do a little networking virtually. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Lana Haddad. She's AWE's board president, and she'll be moderating today's event. Lana?
Thank you so much, Megan. Hello, everyone. And on behalf of today's partners, welcome and good morning to you all. So as Megan noted, my name is Lana Haddad, and I work as the Legislative Services Section Manager for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. I have the great honor of serving as the AWE Board President with a group of thoughtful and really brilliant leaders, each one of them deeply committed to supporting all of us on our professional journeys. I really appreciate each of you, and at last count, that's nearly 200 registered participants taking the time out of your day today to spend with us. Before we start on today's exciting program, I first would like to take a moment to personally acknowledge that as I sit in my home in an area now called Long Beach, I am on the stolen and unceded land of the Tongva Nation who lived and continue to live here. I recognize and honor the Tongva people and their spiritual connection to this land as the first stewards and the traditional caretakers of this land. I thank them for their continued strength, perseverance, and resistance. A land acknowledgement is only a first step, but it is an important first step. So one of the things I've oftentimes felt is that one of the most unique things about humanity is our universal love and need for stories. Power shows up in whose stories are told and centered. Through AWE's Path to Power events, we aim to center the stories of our always amazing panelists, and we hope you'll find continued inspiration to keep on striving for whatever your definition of success looks like, and find encouragement and strength in the many points of commonality between so many diverse stories. For this very special Water Professionals Week event, we have a wonderful panel of dynamic industry leaders. So first, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Patty Cortez, Mayor of the City of Covina, and also a very dear colleague of mine in her work as the Executive Manager for the Upper San Gabriel Valley's Municipal Water District. She's the Executive Manager and has been that since September 2013. Her innovative leadership and outreach programs have earned upper national and regional recognition. In her spare time, Patty also serves as a state leg committee member and Region 8 outreach captain for ACWA, which is the Association of California Water Agencies. And she is the legislative committee co-chair and board member for the Southern California Water Coalition. Welcome, Patty.
Thank you.
Secondly, Rajani Nair, Deputy Director for the Watershed Protection Division within Environmental Services Department in the city of San Jose, doing great things up in San Jose. Rajani has over 23 years experience as a civil engineer, and throughout her career, she has led a wide range of diverse multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects from transportation to sanitary, storm, and electrical work. Throughout her career, Rajani has led teams to help deliver major multi-sector infrastructure projects in large, diverse cities, including basically the entire Eastern Seaboard, Rajani? Atlantic City, New Jersey, Boston, Massachusetts, New York City, and San Jose. Finally, and very close to home, Jennifer Rojas, who is the Director of Water and Sewer Field Operations for Long Beach Water Department. Jennifer oversees the Field Operations Bureau, which is comprised of 4 divisions: water construction, water services, sewer operation, and support services. She's been in the industry for, I'm going to say only 11 years, but has done great things and holds industry certifications in collection system maintenance from the California Water Environment Association, which is CWEA, water distribution and water treatment from the State Water Resources Control Board. She also has served on CWEA's Collection Systems Committee and is the current member of CWEA, the Water Environment Federation, and the American Water Works Association. So welcome to both Rajani and Jennifer. Thank you, welcome. And we're going to go ahead and get started because I know these folks didn't register to hear me talk. So the first question I'd like to take some time on is, can you share something that surprises you when you stop to think about it, about your path and your current role? So instead of talking about what it is, tell us something that surprises you when you get to think about your job. So Patty, why don't we start with you?
I knew you were going to do that. I think for me, and I hesitate saying this because I don't want to put this out there, but what surprises me is that I didn't really have a path to get to where I'm at here. Like, I didn't graduate from LMU saying, I want to work in water. Like, I want to be a, director of government affairs. Like, I don't think any little girl out there says that. But I think the fact that from the beginning, I was very lucky to have opportunities come before me. And I think the fact that I didn't say no to anything, left myself open to the many wonderful experiences that I had very early on in my career, doing sports and entertainment PR, and then jumping into public affairs work with a member of Congress, to then, kind of going into Edison, and then now here in water. Like, I feel like there was a purpose for all of those opportunities to get to where I'm at today. And I'm so thankful for that. I'm thankful that I didn't say no to anything. And I'm thankful that I didn't have a preconceived notion of what I should be at this stage of my life, because I was able to have that flexibility to say yes to many things. And for that, I'm really thankful for.
A great answer. Thank you for that. Rajani, how about you? What is a surprising thing about your career?
I would say, as I started as a civil engineer, I was really fortunate to always be given opportunities. When you think about the history of women in civil engineering, who had kind of a glass ceiling in their careers, I never had that. And I mean, when you ask the question, I'm just reflecting immediately that came to mind. So it's not really a surprise. I guess I assumed throughout my career, but looking back, I was really fortunate, and especially a woman of color. I was not quite the norm within my industry, and so that was definitely something that I'm really grateful for. And looking back, fortunate in so many ways. I think, to Patty's point, being flexible, I was inflexible. And I was a hardcore civil engineer, could not go beyond that lens. And when I swerved to join our civic innovation team, which was really about bringing more technology into our local government and being more connected to our community so that it's accessible and more impactful as to how we serve our community, that was a complete left field. So how I survived that, that's a surprise. But it gave me, as Patty pointed, I think it gave me a greater appreciation and a vast perspective as to how I want to still be passionate about delivering and building, because that's still core to me. But how do I infuse these other aspects that the technology sector has really given me? And being in San Jose, I'm in the heart of it all. So it's, I mean, we're not flying cars yet, but at least,
Soon.
we're soon. So that's part of the reason I feel like I'm really blessed with that too, as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Jennifer.
Yes, well, yes, my career path was also, as Patty mentioned, not to be expected. I was in the private sector for the beginning, maybe the first decade of my career. And when I went over to the public sector, to the organization I'm with now, Long Beach Water Department, I used the skills that I had developed early on and just really built on my strengths. And similar to the other panelists here, you always have to be willing to take on new projects, take on new challenges, and that will be recognized and be rewarded. I think one of the things that were most surprising to me is how important the relationships that you form over your career are. There was times in my career where like a boss of mine would think of me for something that I wouldn't even think of myself for, but because they saw something in me that could be great for that position, then that started getting me thinking about that. And that really just kind of underscores the fact that if you work hard and you take on new challenges and you're always willing to learn, that other people will recognize it, and that will put you on the right path to success.
Oh, wow, that's a great answer, Jennifer, and a perfect segue to sort of the next question. So there's a common theme that I'm hearing, right, which is like saying yes to the unexpected opportunity, whether it was you're wanting to be inflexible and focused on that, civic engineer path, and then saying a yes to something completely different. So in your career, who's made an impact on you and for your career, and how has that, I'm going to call it mentorship, played a role in your career and where you are now? And I have a second follow-up question to that once we go through that one. So who'd like to start? We want to shake it up. Rajani, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can go. I will say from a foundation level, my dad was my inspiration, just because he was a mechanical engineer. So I think that's how I really thought about engineering. I don't think it was very common for people to always think about engineering unless there was someone in your life. But as I grew in my profession, there were mentors that were specifically that were part of organizations similar to AWI. I was in the transportation industry, so there was a women's focused organization and mentors through that program who were involved with various metropolitan, various transit authority type of organizations. That's where I started, just to kind of understand my basic skills and really understand where I needed to grow further, not looking at it as a weakness, but where are opportunities where I can really further expand to diversify my skills. Again, I was still in my lens of engineering, but when I moved and when I came out here to California, working in local government just opened my doors in so many perspectives, because we had the public interaction and also the constituents who are very vocal, to really it gave it more of a dimensional that I never was really exposed to when I was in the private sector. So but yeah, just the mentors in my profession were primarily it. And now where I'm at with my mentoring, I've actually gone outside of my typical engineering kind of professional and really sought out folks who are more versed with the community and maybe a little more on the political side of things, just because they understand that lens, which I'm not as exposed to.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Jennifer, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'll kind of pick up on a little bit of what I touched on the last question. When I started with the Long Beach Water Department, I was the procurement officer. And a few years in, the superintendent of store operations had retired. And my boss, who was the deputy general manager at the time, he said, have you ever thought about that position? And I was like, no, I didn't think, no, I've never thought about that position because I have no background in store whatsoever. And he said, you know what, Jennifer, we have 30 guys over there that know how to, fix SOAR and clean SOAR and inspect SOAR. I don't need another one of those kind of people. What I need is someone that knows how to manage people. And that's why I think you'd be great for that position. And when he said that, I was like, oh, okay. Like, so, but that was because after, I had worked for him for several years. So I had through those years proved my, just what I was able to do. And so that's what I was kind of talking about earlier, where like your skills kind of meet the opportunity. And of course that I ended up, taking that position. And I also felt, I had to help hold up my end of the bargain. He knew that I was going to put the work in to learn the business and be committed to it. And of course I followed through. And so, yeah, so that's just a perfect example of how, just people will notice when you go the extra mile and meet challenges and take on extra challenges.
Thank you. Patty?
For me, I think I really had to embrace the concept of a mentor because I'm a little bit hard-headed and, I'll admit sometimes, there's one thing to have like the positive mentor, which is much easier to listen to, but there's also the other mentor that pushes you and challenges you to do things because like Jennifer said, like they see things in you that you don't see for yourself, or, especially like as a woman, like I second guess myself, at various junctures of my career, and to have those mentors that I have kept close to me that challenge me to go beyond it, whether it's a closed door that I've received or just the fear of taking the leap into something different. Case in point, like when I was asked to run for office, I did it as an appointment for a year and I was perfectly fine because I was just going to check it out and no harm, no foul. And had I not had that very honest conversation by a very dear mentor of mine, who is a legislator, that said, you have it in you to do it. And I appreciate those moments that, I have mentors that challenge me to do things, like I said, but I also appreciate those mentors that give me the knowledge that I need for my career. And so I think for me, it would just be like, be open to mentors because one, they will appear in front of you when you least expect it and not who you might think it is, because it doesn't have to be someone very high up in their career. It could be a colleague of yours. But for me, they've been very vital in really getting to where I'm at today. So I appreciate every single one of them.
It also almost sounds like each one of you sort of identified an emotional mentor to help you through the emotional struggles, and then almost like a technical one too that would help you navigate the worlds that you were entering, right, as you were kind of going through that journey. So how does that experience with being championed in your industry or being provided that kind of emotion, how does that show up in the way that you lead your teams now? I'm just going to leave it open, so anybody who wants to speak can go.
Well, I'll go first. Just I think for me, I've really looked at the experiences that I've had in the past, moving up in my career, where I've had those conversations with my mentors or with people that saw things in me that I didn't see in myself. And so I really tried to consciously make that effort as a manager now to give back some of those, lessons learned or mentoring opportunities back to my staff. So I think it's made me a better manager because it's made me more self-aware of what the needs of my staff are and and to really put that forward as a manager to make sure that they're getting the career growth and the fulfillment they need to move up in their career.
Oh, Jennifer, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say, I definitely what Patty said, that made me more inclined to foster, the people coming up in their career. And more than that, especially with my own experience, is to look outside of what is maybe the traditional path, because in water, a lot of times there's a traditional career path, like and which are fine, and those are still going to exist. But sometimes there might be somebody that is from another, like that's on another track that might enrich your team because they have those skills that can be transferable over to maybe your line of work. And so so I think just being more open to other other people that might not traditionally be in that career path. For example, in SOAR operations, there had never been any females in any of the construction work, and so but when I was there I was in that position for several years. It was a kind of like a labor of love, like to actively look for women that had skills that we could teach them, we could teach them what they needed to do the job. But I think otherwise they might be passed over very easily because they didn't have the background that some of the male counterparts did. So it just made me more open and just wanting to continue that, kind of being a mentor myself to others.
Thank you for that. So it looks like there's construction noises in my background, so I'm going to put my headphones on. But while I do that, what I would like to do is ask the next question. So many of us have been invited to be participants on panels, and oftentimes when we enter a meeting space, we can be, in our industries, maybe the only woman in the room. And so the question is, do you ever feel intimidated by that? But I'm just going to make it broad. How do you into that setting? And then how do you prepare yourself to be in those settings and not feel intimidated or nervous or something like that? Rajani, I think this happens to you, Rajani, most.
Yeah, sure. I was gonna say, I'm just trying to, I was reflecting on just my opportunities when I did panel discussion. I really don't think so much as to I'm the only woman in the room, but I have something to offer, a different perspective where people can really think a little bit differently. And particularly when I was predominantly in a male organization. I mean, engineering is, in the construction field, anywhere I went, it was predominantly men. I never really experienced any insecurities of any of that sort. If anything, the insecurity was if I wasn't able to comprehend what they were trying to explain to me, right? So it wasn't really a gender as much as to more of the technical. But I think that was also a positive for me because it gave me the opportunity to say, well, can you explain that a little bit deeper? I haven't, or some, these kinds of, so I think for we as women, Patty talked about the insecurities we feel. And I think that is just across the board, even both sides, men and women. I think we all have levels of insecurities when it's like public speaking or just being in a leadership role. And I think that's the thing we always need to remember is just that what's our gut saying, or what's our basic moral compass, that we operate on. And I think leveraging that is really positive, for us to ensure that we're, able to speak up and kind of have a position at the table. I think that's important. So.
Patty,
I was just gonna say, I just to go what Rajani said is that just to remind yourself, because it's natural to be insecure. It's natural to sometimes feel intimidated. I felt more intimidated, I think, earlier in my career. But there's always that little voice in your head kind of saying, yeah, you do belong here, but you just have to replace that voice with another one that says, yes, you're here for a reason, and you have something of value to say and to contribute. And it really, to say that like, oh, I'm never intimidated is wrong. Of course, I'm going to feel intimidated once in a while, depending on the group I'm with and how familiar I am with them. But you just do your best. And if that means like sometimes when it would be the first meeting, maybe I would say less and kind of scope out the, how does this meeting go? And then as I go to subsequent meetings with that same group, feeling more comfortable, more confident. Sometimes you have to ease into it, but everybody has their own, whatever they're comfortable with. Some people might just want to start by just, being really vocal at the beginning, but it's whatever works for the individual. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. Patty?
I fortunately or unfortunately have always worked in a male dominated environment. So I think it's to say that I'm used to it, I think is probably the best way to put it. But I will say that that exactly what Jennifer said, like it's reminding yourself that you're there for a reason and you have something positive to contribute just as much as the men in the room. I look at it from that perspective, and I also look at it from the perspective of what can I learn from the men in the room, because I think that just makes you that much more, I guess, comfortable being there, because you put yourself at that same level, and you realize at that point there is no difference between me and then the person next to me. We're all equal. And even like on the council, I'm the only woman, to the 4 men of my council. And, and I will admit in the beginning, I was the quiet one. And now, I think they're like, okay, whatever she wants, but it's a good working relationship because we respect each other. And I think that's how you gain your respect, is just by knowing and feeling the comfort that you have something to contribute and you're just as valuable as the man that's sitting right next to you.
Yeah. What's really interesting for me is I think that OWI serves a really important space in creating a community where people can come and feel strengthened for when they walk into any environment that feels more challenging, right? So, and a lot of it deals with, the question of authenticity. I hear a lot about imposter syndrome, which I'm not actually convinced, even though there's reams of paperwork on it. I'm convinced that people try to make us feel like imposters when really we own our intelligence at this point, and we know that we belong in these spaces. And so maybe it's a question of everybody else recognizing that we own that intelligence, right? And that we actually do belong in the space. The other thing is that the problems that were created by the minds of homogenous rooms aren't going to be solved by rooms full of homogenous minds. We actually need people. And that's the value that I think diversity and inclusion brings to all organizations and our society, which is providing that extra voice that hadn't been heard or hadn't been centered, those stories that are not ever usually told. When you bring your perspective with your stories behind you, you're adding a layer of knowledge in the room that couldn't have existed before you were there. And I think it's really important to own that. And also, though, a little bit of humility, being quiet and listening is not a bad thing either. Like it gets you a long way to learn, because we don't know everything, even though we are smart. And I think you can learn from anybody that you happen to come across. And sometimes they're counter models, sometimes they're models, but the important thing is you'll be able to learn from whichever group you happen to be in and contribute to that same room. So those are wonderful answers. So thank you for bearing with this construction noise. I'm so sorry, it's bad timing, but I couldn't put this off any longer. We were so excited about this panel. So moving on for the next question, I'm going to take one from, let's see. And we'll take this question. I think it's a really good one from the audience. So early in the career, in each of your careers, how did you balance not knowing or being able to contribute much with being, showing confidence and demonstrating your capability for actually doing the work that you had signed on and had been hired to do? So this particular listener says, I struggle with feeling like I sound arrogant, especially in a room full of experienced folks. That's actually a really good question, isn't it? Because we know those perceptions of too loud, too assertive are heavier when you are a woman or a marginalized person. So how do we deal with that? How have you discovered strategies to help balance those two things?
For me, I definitely take the active listening, just the whole concept of it, just to hear what is being told to you and processing it, and then, ensuring that you understood it. And I practiced that earlier on in my career, just because it was, one, I wanted to be engaged in the conversation and they know that they're being heard. And then two, it actually slowed my thought process, because I too kind of felt arrogant at times. Well, I know better than what, this person's saying, but, and I would, it's all about your tone, and it's also about your body positioning too, right? And you lean in and you really show compassion into the situation. So that was definitely something. Actually, one of the things that my mentor really helped me, kind of coach me through, because I was always kind of confident in my presentation, but as a woman, that is always misinterpreted,
That's
and
right.
so so I think those are some basic skills that you can practice. And then if you have a confidant in whatever working environment, ask them for feedback. What do they think, how you're presenting yourself, and then go out to lunch with the people who you think are intimidating, or whatever. Just build a friendship, and I think that
Mhm.
that makes it a little bit easier. So those are just some ideas.
Those are great ideas. Thank you, Regina. Jennifer?
I think very similarly, especially at first, like, earlier in your career, when you're new to a certain job or with a group of people, kind of letting them have the floor first, because at least, it kind of settles them a little, lets them have their say, but making sure that you also voice your opinion, if it's relevant. And I think really important thing that I have to get comfortable with is that, sometimes some people aren't going to like it. And what, you can't necessarily please everybody. Some people are going to be taken aback by that, just for their own reasons that have nothing to do with you. And to just accept that there are people, though, that will value your contribution, and that will recognize that you do have something important to say, and to not get too bogged down on if there's a couple people that may not see the value in it, that you have to be okay with that, because you did reach some people, and as you kind of move on in your career and you get more confident in that, and that kind of can grow more and more. But just be okay that sometimes not everybody's you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea sometimes. That's okay, So.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I
Madam
think
Mayor.
well, I think that's one of the hardest things for me, is to accept, is that, kind of the same, like, I do kind of take the kind of be respectful and listen in the beginning, and kind of like you do my active listening and kind of feel people out in the room, to temper the way I communicate back to the individuals in the room, but the hardest part for me is accepting the fact that I'm not going to be liked by everybody I meet, or I'm going to rub somebody the wrong way. And I don't know if that's just, the preconceived Latina first daughter syndrome, that everybody has to please everybody. I don't know if it's a little bit of that, but it's also, for me, that has been my hardest struggle, is overcoming that, is being comfortable with that not everyone's going to be my friend. I may say something that rubs somebody the wrong way, but as long as I am speaking my truth, and, and it's not coming from a negative space, then, I have to own it, and just walk away and know that, I'll make a new friend tomorrow. It's like, it's water under the bridge at this point. But I thank you, Jennifer, for bringing that up, because it's something that I still struggle with.
And I want to add that that's true of men as well. I don't think there's anybody, man or woman, that everybody thinks that they're, 100% great, or that and in every situation that they please, the audience likes everything they say. There's, being able to confront challenges, and still be confident in your position. I think that to me helps me not focus so much on, some people just don't agree. Some people don't agree. And it really doesn't do me any good to really dwell too much on, well, it's because I'm a woman, or because of this, it might be because I have brown hair, it might be because of whatever I'm wearing, who knows. I really, that's not productive for me to focus on those, that if that ever happens, so.
But I would say, Jennifer, just to differentiate, if you're working in a team, you do need to get along to
Oh, for
deliver
sure.
something. And I think that maybe that was kind of my focus is,
Yes.
what do we need to really do to ensure that we're getting to the goal line as to what we need to complete. Yeah, I totally agree with Patty and Jennifer. I mean, you're not going to please everybody, but if you have someone you're relying on to deliver something, I think it's very critical to have an open, honest, direct conversation, how you can achieve whatever you need to achieve. So.
Well, that is, I think, all of that is a really good lead into our next question. And then we have some more in the chat that I'll be bringing up in a few minutes. So all of you focused on relationships in your answers that we were just talking about. And so the next question is that women are perceived as better leaders in a crisis because we tend to put more emphasis on interpersonal skills, right? Those relationship building skills. So what would you say are hallmarks of your leadership style, and how do you think it's unique, or is it unique in the water world? So I'm actually very interested in this because I'm always curious, because I think so much of this goes back to not who we are as women per se, as a category, because I don't think that's discrete, but more about how people socialize girl children when we're younger versus how boy children are raised. So I'm interested in your answers, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. So Regina, you had an immediate reaction to that question, so I'm going to call on you first.
I might be the atypical girl, because I'm so analytical. So social skills as an engineer is something has to be learned, not inherit. So that's always been one of my I guess running jokes, I guess, it's like, it's hard for me to always be, socializing, and if it's not around work, and so for me, actually where I've transformative is kind of probably my leadership style, where I really taken a lot of the ethos from the tech world in how we can be more transparent in our conversations, not just around work, but then also personally and professionally, so I've been using, I don't know if anyone has heard of the Objective Key Results. It's a book that was from John Doerr called Measure What Matters. And it really has been a helpful tool for me to remind myself that it's not just work, but it's also the people that I lead, to ensure that they're also, getting the benefits for them to grow, in our organization. So that's been, I think, for me, very important, to give everyone, I'm not a title person. I believe anyone who can do the job has the opportunity to lead. But we have to lead together, so we have to kind of know that we're not going in different directions, because that's inefficient. So, so those are some of what I bring to my leadership style.
I have to say that was spoken like an engineer, because inefficiency is just antithematic to you, isn't it?
Thanks.
Yes, recognize that. Thank you. Patty, would you like to share?
I think for me, it's, I'm definitely like in the time of crisis or high intense situations, like, I think I've always been the one that's kind of like calm, like, oh, there's a fire. Okay, well, let's go put it out. It's like kind of like that's kind of how I've always approached any type of crisis or high pressure situation. So I have found that it has helped calm my staff if as a leader, I take on that role of being the one that's calm, while I may be spinning circles in my head, but at least I'm, giving them the comfort that it's okay, we're going to work through this, we're going to figure it out and we'll move on. And so I've really tried, especially because, here at Upper District, it's a very small staff. So we are hands-on on pretty much everything most of the time. And so I've really tried to promote that feeling of stability here so that we can kind of get through the day and what we need to accomplish. I do think it's more probably needed or required in smaller environments because you want to always kind of keep things moving and not kind of like, the sky's falling type of situation. So that's kind of like how I've always been. And I don't know if it's a little boy or a little girl thing, but definitely I will say that it was instilled in me from a very young age, that it was, as like I said, the first Latina daughter syndrome, it was, very much instilled in me that it was my job to kind of, fix the problem and find a solution to it, and so I carry that with me even in my career. So
Yeah. Jennifer?
Yeah, definitely. I think I think what I bring to my leadership style is, and what I see differently from maybe some of the men that I work with, is my ability to kind of find common ground when there's interpersonal conflict. So many times I've seen, like among, say among a crew or among, coworkers that are male, they have a disagreement and they just escalate, and none of them wants to back down. And it's like, my gosh, you guys have and just when I come into it, I'm able to bring down the tension and kind of like, okay, we all have good intentions here. We all want to get the job done, and try to find that, just kind of just bring the tension down and try to find that common path so that we can get along and work together. And I don't know if it's a female thing or what, because it feels like I've always done that. But I think that's one respect where the cultural norms that teach women to be more conciliatory, I think that's an advantage in these situations. Whereas with men, I think in general, of course, it's a gross generalization, but they're kind of more taught to be more like just kind of not back down and be stronger and not, and that's a weakness, but it to back down is a weakness, but I think it's the opposite actually. And I think that's been something that has been an advantage to me as far as being able to make peace among people that have disagreements and not make it be a bigger deal than it has to be.
Yeah, those are really great answers. I mean, I think when you talk about Patty being the calm in the center of a storm, for example, that kind of, it gives reassurance to the people around you that things aren't going to get worse. And that's what Jennifer is talking about. I find humor to be a really effective tool in the leadership toolbox because it breaks tension. It helps sort of relieve a lot of escalating feelings, because then you laugh and sort of the energy dissipates, right? Like it goes in a different direction instead of like consistently bringing up. One of the questions that's in the chat, it kind of caught my attention because I find this framed a lot, especially when people are talking about women at work. And so what the question is, have you found it harder to deal with other women who are unsupportive in the work environment? And for me, the question is not about this imaginary competition between women in the workplace, because I think it's about the difference between sort of competence in the workplace and maybe incompetence in the workplace. So who gets defensive if you walk in a room, or who doesn't support you when you're in a room? I actually think that has so much more to do with how people are confident in their own work or not confident in their work, and less about I'm competing with Patty because we're both in the same industry. Like, what has your experience been with that? Because I haven't found it to be the case that women are less supportive. I actually find that most of my support comes from my peers who are women. So curious what your experience has been with that.
I will say though, like in water, I haven't experienced that. I feel like I feel like, as you said, like maybe because there's like when you and I started, there weren't that many women in water, and so it was more of like, let's band a tribe and help, you know, be supportive of
Yeah.
each other, you know.
Yeah.
The only time I think that I experienced like a difficult female boss was working in the private sector.
Mhm.
And it was eye-opening for me because it was very early on in my career, and I didn't understand it because I had gone from an all-male dominant industry, you know, working in sports, and the men and the women were very supportive. And then I went into this, you know, private consulting business, and it was so opposite. And I think when you're starting off in your career, you expect that people are going to just support you and guide you along through the process. And when I didn't have that, it was very eye-opening, but in terms of that, I knew that's how I didn't want to be, you know, moving on.
Yeah.
And I ironically though, like after I left, then she wrote all these glowing things about me. And I thought, you know, and I thought, you know, and then I thought, well, maybe did I underestimate her? Did I underestimate like her perhaps strictness or way of doing things too harshly? So it did help me kind of take things into perspective a little differently. But you know, I think with anything, you can experience it either with a female or a male boss in any type of environment. But to say that I consistently felt it from a female, no. I think, you know, throughout my career, it's been one, and even now I kind of second guess it, you know, and
Yeah.
because we're friends now, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's funny. That is really funny, Patty.
Yeah, my boss is actually the first female I ever had, and she's great and super supportive and trusts, you know, what I you know need to accomplish, and she guides me because she obviously has more experience in navigating because water is political. I didn't realize how political it is.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. I did know, but not to now that I'm in it. And so, you know, just navigating the water. So if anything, I am grateful for you know, her, and then even my peers, you know, at my level. You know, we do support each other, if anything. And actually, even when we're the only women in a group, we kind of pat each other in the back. You know, if somebody says something, you know, we'll be like, oh, that's a great job, so and so, and you know, and just
Yeah.
kind of elevate that support in a room. You know, I think that's really important. But I've been fortunate. I really have been. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely.
Jennifer.
I think, yeah, I think it's more of an external idea of like that women, you know, are catty with each other. I think that's such a myth, because I've found the opposite. I found that, you know, women and men have always been supportive. And I think a lot of it is perspective. You know, people have different styles of relating to you. And I choose to kind of focus on the positive. You know, if somebody's more quiet or not as, you know, maybe not conversing with me as much, I don't take it like, oh, they don't like me. I just figure, oh, well, they have something else on their mind. And that outlook really helps a lot, because really, I think there's more support to be found amongst colleagues than anything. And you know, or you can also find like outside support if you think you need extra, like groups like AWI. And there's, you know, internal groups that are, you know, of women coworkers that have formed little subgroups together. And you know, I think it is more of a supportive environment. And actually, like Rajini was saying, that you know, when something good would happen, I'd feel like kind of like, oh, like women would be like high five, you know, like kind of like it would be like a little extra, like, yeah, you know. So
Yeah, yeah, that's well. And the other question that's in the chat is, I'm just going to read it. It says, I found often that having allies in the room makes it easier to get your views across. How have you managed to build these kind of partnerships? For example, 2 women in a room and the second one can amplify what the first one says. And that's exactly what I'm hearing from everyone here is those things happen naturally, again, with relationship building and sort of connections. And I think importantly, showing up and being competent and a person of character in the workplace, follow through on your word, deliver what you're going to deliver, and build trust. Because I think, Regina, you actually said the word trust in your answer, which I think is so critical to building relationships that are long lasting and authentic between sort of your working group, the organization that you're in, and the contacts and networks that you build as well. Those have to be based in sort of trust and honesty and authentic relationships, right? And that carries you through, I think, a lot of the challenges that people can run into. So what's the best advice? And we're kind of getting close to the end, and we have so many more questions, and I could listen to you all talk for the rest of the afternoon, but I know we don't have that much time. So can you share what the best advice that you've received in your career with this, with our audience?
I'll go first. I think, well, I know that the best advice that I've received is to, and Jennifer said it, it's owning and understanding that I have something to contribute and I've earned my place in that room or my seat in this chair, you know. It's really owning that. And I heard that from someone that has truly been a very good mentor to me. He was an excellent boss for me, and really taking the time to sit with that and to understand that, you know, I am the most qualified person to be in this position. And I am very appreciative of that talk. And because there are words that I carry with me in everything that I do, in owning the fact that, you know, I'm here for a purpose and I earned my right to be here. And I think that goes for anybody, you know, as you move up in your career, is just to remember that, like, you earned your spot. And I really hold on to those words very much because it's what kind of gets me going.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think probably the best, it wasn't so much advice, but something that I picked up from a management training that I did several years ago. And it's so simple, but yet so, like, if you do these, it's basically the three things that you should, that you really should be for success. And it's three very simple things. It's be kind, be honest, and be productive. And really, if you are those three things at all times, then, I mean, good things have to follow. And it's not as, sometimes it's harder than you think, you know, being kind. Sometimes you might not want to be kind to somebody that maybe was not nice to you, but you have to remember that, you know, that doesn't, you're only hurting yourself and kind of diminishing yourself if you give back that negative energy. So you always have to have that perspective. And there's other examples, it's, you know, but I actually give that advice to my my employees a lot of times when I'm first meeting them, when they're onboarding with us, because of that, pretty much if you follow that, you can't go wrong. So
yeah, that is really great. Plus it fits on a sign. You can just put it in your office really
exactly.
easily, right?
For me, the best advice, not so much about my personal skills, but more just where I want to see myself in the future. Every 5 years, just take a snapshot of where you want to be and where do you need to grow to get to that. And I've been using that for the past 25 years, just kind of might be a little slow, but that's okay. You know, I think it was fine, just, you know, because life happened in the midst of all of that. So, you know, you have to adapt and adjust. So, you know, being a parent and so forth. So I think for me, that's been very important, just kind of having that outlook, knowing where I want to be, and appreciate that advice.
That's, yeah, all really fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing it all with all of us. There was a really pragmatic little piece of information, like advice that one of my bosses gave me when I first entered municipal government. And she said, always take a notebook and a pen with you into a meeting. And I thought, you know what? I still, to this day, have a notebook and a pen in every single meeting, because you never know what thing you're going to find out or discover. And it's very helpful to be able to write things down and not have to just rely on memory too. So that's very practical, not nearly as philosophical and emotional as the wonderful advice you all shared, but something to share. And I think it's still very helpful. We have a number of other questions, some of them very big, like how do we deal with systemic racism? I think that would make a good topic for a whole nother webinar. So we're going to table that, but I think it's a really important one. And I wanted to mention it because I wanted to put it out here. But we have a question about what's the best advice to build a healthy work-life balance. And actually, I'm going to put that with a caveat. And I think that this applies to everybody. The workaholic culture isn't benefiting anyone. But how do you balance it in your life? Or the dirty secret, do you? Can you? Is it even possible to balance those things? Especially when you've got multiple roles that are demanding and pulling on your time. So who would like to take that one on first?
I'll leave it to somebody who has a positive way of figuring it out.
Right.
It's not easy. It really isn't. And I think I mean, especially if you're in a relationship and you're responsible, for a child or, something in my scenario. I mean, my husband and I mean, we are a team as to how we balance it. And I do make a concert. I was involved in the EOC, which in our emergency response after COVID, which really just took so much time out of my personal life that I really needed to reel that back. So I think also just hearing from my husband too, he was just like, hey, what's going on? I can't hold the ship forever. So I think these are really important for you to have those open conversations with whoever, and really understand your priorities. And I think you can do both personally.
Mm-hmm.
That is a myth that you only have to choose one or the other. That is not true. I think you can do both. Even four-legged children as well, right? I think it's really definitely how do we balance it, because we need to understand what matters for us, because at the end of the day, you got to really understand what drives you and your passions and your priorities. I think that's important, and how you balance it. It can work out, but it's not 50% here, 50% there. That would be perfect, but it's just always going to be a seesaw.
Yes.
I think you just have to remember that you're not always going to get it perfect, but to just always remind yourself that you are a better worker, a better person at work if you have a more well-balanced and well-rounded life. And so if that means, making sure that you schedule lunches so that you don't work through lunch, or schedule vacations so that you don't miss them and you go through a whole year without vacations, you have to kind of force yourself. And I think anybody that does that, when you really pay attention to the other parts of life, then you come back to work a better, a more valuable contributor to your organization. So.
Yeah, and I think somebody very wise that's on this panel and happens to be a good friend of mine told me that I think it's really listening to your body and listening to what's inside of you. Like, I think for me, I really have taken that and taken a step back and focused on myself and my well-being, because it's not just work. It's, the time that you give as mothers, as spouses, as sisters, or, daughters. It's all of that comes into it. But it's learning, is taking the time to listen to yourself and how is your body feeling? And sometimes it's just sitting in a quiet room and I turn my phone off, and, my sister thinks I'm nuts because I'm in my room by myself, but I just need peace and quiet with the puppy, and I'm fine. And, and then I can keep going. And I really just turn the noise off, because it's amazing how that rejuvenates you.
It really, really does, doesn't it? That need for silence. I was just mentioning at the top of the call, the fan was going and I turned it off, and it was like my ears relaxed because I didn't realize how much that noise that was contributing, right? Yeah. Well, I want to take a moment to thank and really recognize and honor the contributions you all have shared, your wisdom, your generosity of time and kindness, and just all of you have been so wonderful during this panel, and I really appreciated our time spent together. We have so many more questions, and like I said, we could talk for the whole afternoon, but this won't be the last time we have a conversation, and look forward to future times. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lana. Thank you, everyone, for just being so candid and sharing with us. I really valued that last. I think that was a great note to end on. And what I really appreciated about it is that work-life balance isn't just magic that happens to some people and doesn't happen to others. It takes deliberate effort and tuning into what you need and prioritizing yourself. So really appreciate all of your advice for this whole panel. It was so phenomenal. I have a million notes. Also want to just thank CWEA, Aqua, Baywork, CASA, American Waterworks Association, everyone who invited us to partner with them to celebrate Water Professionals Week and showcase these fabulous women in water. Water Professionals Week goes through October 9th, and I understand there are some ongoing activities. So there's a virtual water career fair happening. CWEA members are taking over their social media channels this week, so check those out. And then tomorrow there's an event at 11 a.m. That's taking a deeper dive into the Clean Water Act, which is now 50 years old. So be sure to sign on and participate in any of those activities. If you're interested in learning more about AWE, visit our website at awwee.org. Sign up for our newsletter. We'd love to have you participate in future events with us. So thanks again, Patty, Jennifer, Rajani, and Lana. Really appreciate this conversation. And also to Megan and Alec at CWEA who helped get us organized and hosted the Zoom. And then of course to the audience. Really, really glad to have you all and hope we'll see you soon.